You're listening to the Faith Chats podcast, where we hope you will be challenged and inspired in your faith journey as you hear how God has changed the lives of ordinary people like you and me. I'm your host, Lydia Garner, and it is my pleasure to introduce you today to my brother, Garrett Piper. We have been good friends for a lifetime, and he has also worked in many roles, including pastor and painter. Join us today as we candidly chat about our experience as missionary kids, our Bible college experiences, and some really raw discussion about times of depression in both of our lives. Please keep in mind that we are not professional counselors in that realm, so everything said was based on our personal experiences. We hope you enjoy this chat and this glimpse into what makes us who we are today as we serve the Lord here in our beloved land of New Zealand. Hi, it's Lydia here, and I'm talking to my brother Garrett, and we're going to be talking about his faith journey and how God has worked in his life. So, welcome, Garrett.
Hi, Lydia, my sister.
Tell me, how old were you when we came to New Zealand?
I was 9 years old.
And what was it like for you? Like, did you feel traumatized by leaving America?
Not really at all. I had friends, but when Mum and Dad told us that we were going to be shifting across the world, it was like, okay, that'll be different. But I wasn't worried by it.
Yeah, I felt quite similar. I didn't feel like it was a really scary thing. It just seemed like another adventure in our life because we just had a lot of fun with Mom and Dad, so I didn't feel like it was scary.
Mm-hmm.
And when you got here, how did you find that?
Well, yeah, so once we got plugged into the church in Hamilton and made some friends, and yeah, I didn't really think anything of it. I mean, we would go back to the States every 4 years, and I would see some of them again, but not really. Some of them were still in school, but a lot of the ones I was close to in the States, at least my male friends, a lot of them didn't really follow the same path as me, I don't think. So I lost touch with a lot of them and kept closer contact with all my New Zealand friends, and then when I went to college, it was college friends. So
how did you find it, like when we went back to the States? I know I found it quite a bit of culture shock. How old are you when we went on our first furlough?
I think I was 12 when we first went back because, I feel like I was short when I went back, and then I was taller when I came back. So I'm pretty sure that was the time that we did our first furlough. And yeah, I mean, already by then, I think I had started to pick up an accent that Americans were like, why do you say dollar instead of dollar? And so it had already started then that I was not going to be a normal American ever again. So.
And they wanted you to always say rubbish.
Yeah, so I'd kind of picked up a lot of the slang here, or the proper English of New Zealand.
How did you feel as we traveled around to all the different churches and stuff and saw the different youth groups? I mean, they were very different to our church in New Zealand. Did you have thoughts about that, or was it just what it was?
I don't know. I think I found I didn't like certain things about preppy kind of popular clubs in the US, and yeah, I just was like, I want to go home.
Yeah, I think
to New Zealand.
I felt that way that first furlough because I turned 15 while we were in the States. And I found that because we'd lived over here and we'd been in small churches and we'd seen a lot of things as pastors' kids, as missionary kids, we'd seen a lot of people and cultures that, like, you could spot the hypocrisy faster. Or I don't know if that's why. I would see it and I was like, whoa, this is a youth group. And I was like, oh, I didn't like the girly girls that were prissy and stuff like that, or just sort of, I can see the preppy side of things. It's not that there weren't nice people, but it was like those sort of stood out to me. It was very different to what I was used to. And it was sort of like America was our culture shock because New Zealand was our home.
Yeah, I think so.
And so how did you find, like, when you went to Bible college in Canada, because you were only 17, how did you find that experience? Because that was your first time properly away from home.
Yeah, well, so going to Bible college was exciting, and it was, I mean, it was a little bit gutting because I timed it wrong, and I didn't have my full license. I was 2 days off trying to get my full license, and I flew away. So I felt a little bit like, oh man, I won't be able to drive over there as much, but I didn't realize that they didn't care. because they couldn't penalize me because I didn't have a U.S. driver's license to punish me with. So that was kind of good. But
Anyway, go away from all the things you got away with on your New Zealand license.
Well, and so yeah, the change. Yeah, I think we both found Canada a bit easier to get used to rather than the States. And Faithway was really cool.
Did you have any say in us going to Faithway? Or was it more my choice?
Yeah, it was probably more your choice. It was mainly, I think it came down to who would accept us, and with our homeschooling grades, and West Coast was like one of the top options, but yeah, we were too late, I think, in the year to apply to be accepted, whereas Faithway was like, oh, we'll take you.
I thought it was between Maranatha and
No.
Faithway.
Yeah, Maranatha got ruled out a bit earlier because possible costs, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. All I remember was I was 20 and I didn't want to marry an American. Well, I would have potentially been open to that. I was just a bit nervous about going to an American, super American college because I felt like that cultural difference would be distracting. And I didn't think that if I was going for my MRS degree, which I wasn't going for entirely, but it was an option, that an American just wouldn't understand sort of where I was coming from. And obviously in the end I married a Kiwi, and that was perfect because he'd been around Americans a lot, so it ended up being absolutely perfect. But I really enjoyed the smallness of going to Faithway, and because it was more intimate, like what we were used to in our churches here, though the church was huge. How did you find going to, like, from our church of, what was it, probably 100, 120 on a good day, to a church of, what was it, 700?
Yeah, 600, I think it was when we were there. Yeah, I mean, the numbers, like, I didn't know everyone still, but, like, I enjoyed being a part of the church, and I enjoyed that the teachers would know who I was, because the school was only 70, I think, when we were there.
I think it was 60 the year I was there, which is crazy.
No, I think it was 70.
Sorry?
We nearly got 80 that year, because that was one of our biggest years.
Huh.
2007, 2008 was one of the larger number years, but there was not so big that, like, Pastor Baker, Mrs. Baker, Pastor Bowler, they wouldn't be able to remember your name or be like, oh, what's your name again? Like, after a few weeks, they knew who everyone was.
Oh, yeah.
And so I enjoyed the personal side of that. So and then for us, it was really just getting used to cleaning such a big church. I think being on the work side of things around Faithway and cleaning an auditorium that seats 600 people after every service, and cleaning the entranceways, and it was a good experience. I really enjoyed it.
And to be clear, we were cleaning because we were international students. So on our student visa, we were able to work for the school as part of our work scholarship. So that went toward our things. They didn't just put us to work like slaves.
No. That was thankfully being able to pay off our school bill.
Do you know what school cost? Because I honestly had no idea. I feel like Mom and Dad didn't really ever make us pay for anything, and I see that as a blessing now, but also I would think it would have been interesting to know sort of what stuff costs. I had no clue.
Well, I have no idea either. Like, I know that Mom and Dad had to pay for all of our books, and every year I would freak out on the first day where they would be like, okay, you need to buy all your books. And I'm like, I don't have any money. How am I going to pay for this? Mom, Dad, where's the money? What are we doing? And I would call them, and it was always the middle of the night after that first chapel. And they're like, Garrett, we'll pay the book. Just tell them what you want, and we'll buy it later. We can pay it later. I'm like, oh, sorry, Dad. Go back to sleep.
Well,
Yeah.
That first year, though, Mom and Dad did it really well. I was reading a book about missionary kids just recently in third culture and how to serve them well and to help to avoid different traumas. One of the things that it said was that when your children go to Bible college, it can be quite intimidating and overwhelming because suddenly they're just sort of thrust out of the family home without any support even in the country. And Mom and Dad planned to come for a furlough, and so they were in the continent at least during that time. So they were able to visit us several times during our first few months, and I felt that was really helpful because I always knew, oh, they're going to come visit us soon. They left in February, so they were there for the first, quite a while. So I found that helpful. Do you think that mattered to you, or did it just help that I was there at first?
Yeah, I think having you around school gave me the familiarity. I think it must have been just after that then when I broke my knee. Well, I went through the wall, It must have been just after Mum and Dad left, because that was right around spring break, or what's the February camp that we had, like winter
Oh, we had
camp?
like a Valentine's one.
No, like a winter
yeah,
camp.
a winter camp, but it was around Valentine's Day.
But yeah, like, I think, yeah, just being there together made it easier.
How did you hurt your knee? And did you have to go to the doctor for it?
No, I just suffered for 10 years.
No, really?
Just every time if I was ever on my hands and knees and I hit that pressure point, I was
What?
like, ah!
I never knew that.
Well, I didn't really ever want to go to the doctor in Canada. So something had happened that...
No,
Lydia,
tell us what happened.
So Lydia had been banned from talking to boys because she was talking to boys after hours.
We had a lot of really strict rules that did change.
We had strict rules.
Not long after I got kicked out. But anyway.
But yeah, so she had been socialed, it was called, because she wasn't allowed to communicate with boys at all.
Except for you.
And except her brother. And so she was like, oh, I need to ask Johnny a question, the head of staff, the work crew. And I'm like, I'll come interpret. And I ran across the whole foyer in Canada, little knowing that Johnny had just mopped it. And I took a step going around the corner as fast as I could and just completely went sideways, busted my knee through the wall, and then slowly rolled over in pain. And on the footage, you could see Johnny and Lydia both, like, heads up laughing when they saw me do that. Lydia not like, oh, are you all right, Garrett? Just, like, laughing at me.
I didn't know it actually injured you to the point where it hurt for 10 years.
Well, and probably what you didn't know is that the next year, at like the exact same weekend, it was the day before that winter camp, I was polishing those floors and I accidentally turned the machine on upright and it spun and broke another hole in the wall, in like the same wall. And so then I had to go and tell the maintenance man, Mr. Vanderkamp, I'm sorry, but I've broken a hole in the wall again. He's like,
who fixed it? Do you know?
I'm sure it was Pastor Vanderkamp, Mr. Vanderkamp.
Oh, so he did all that sort of stuff?
He did all the repair jobs, I think. So he just was like, oh, Garrett, you again.
When you talk about cleaning the church, so I did kitchen and laundry.
Yeah, I don't think you ever cleaned.
I don't remember ever cleaning the auditorium.
Yeah, so I vacuumed that every service, after every service.
Wow, that's massive.
Yeah, and it was like 2 hours allotted to vacuuming that.
Wow.
And then washing all the windows in the front entrance to the church, which is all glass.
Whoa.
So that's where I first kind of started exploring how high I could sing, like how loud I could sing. Like,
right.
Because nobody could hear me, because all the dorms were far enough away.
Huh.
So
I feel like maybe I helped tidy up hymn books at some stage to help out. I feel like surely I was nice enough to do that. Or maybe I would be studying while I was doing the laundry because our study time was so limited.
Yeah, no, I couldn't really study while I was doing that work, but yeah, we would always finish before 10.
But then that was lights out.
Yeah, 10 was lights out.
So then when did you study?
Never. No, I did study maybe after hours sometime.
Oh, well, I don't know how else we could do it. Like, the only way I could study was if I got up at 5:30 in the morning.
Yep, that was the best time.
Yeah, which is hard because I'm not a morning person, but it was just the only option. And I'd get up at 5:30, and I would trick my body into feeling like it was afternoon by buying Pepsi from the machine because they didn't have Coke. And I would get Pepsi and pop a bag of popcorn, and I would sit in the hallway and eat that, and it would trick my mind into thinking it was afternoon, and so then I was awake enough to do that.
I had a few, had to pull a few all-nighters in the fire escape, because that was the only place you could get, like, when I had reading assignments that I hadn't completed because I was really slack.
Well, because you had to read, like, the whole Old Testament, right?
Yeah, and
one of the terms.
Didn't read it, like, 5 chapters a day. I read it, like, however many chapters I needed to read in the Old Testament in one night.
Like, most of it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was up to, like, Leviticus or something, probably, but
oh, man.
I still had to read
all of Psalms.
From Leviticus to Malachi. Malachi was really easy.
Children, don't procrastinate.
Do not procrastinate. And it was actually after that, through Bible college, that kind of triggered my desire to read. I
Oh.
never enjoyed reading before that, ever.
So you do enjoy reading now? Hey, I'm
Yes,
asking because we haven't lived near each other
yeah, I do
ever
enjoy
since
reading.
then.
I enjoy a good book, like not fiction. I enjoy like anything that's about growing, like
Yeah.
growing character-wise, or spiritual books or biographies. Yeah, that's what I enjoy reading. And I'm reading currently a book I got given 24 years ago by Ryan that I never knew I had.
Oh, the one that I brought?
Yeah, about the story of Robert the Bruce, or
Yeah, well, I haven't read it for a very long time, but I have read it.
the Scottish heritage.
Yeah.
So, how the story of Scotland, really. So that's what I've read one chapter last night.
It's quite
So,
good.
well, we'll see. Yeah, it's historical story, so it's based on fact, so that keeps me interested at the moment, because if it was just a story, I'd be like, I don't want to read this.
Yeah.
But if it's history, I can put up with that and learn something from it.
And so what are you doing with your life now? We're quite a few years past Bible college.
Yeah, so currently I'm assisting a friend in ministry, and so after Bible college, I'd spent the next 5 years, 6 years working as assistant under my dad in Rotorua, and so getting ordained, kind of getting prepared a bit more for ministry, working part-time, doing ministry part-time, and then in 2017, an opportunity came up to take over a church, a small church that was looking for a pastor. And so we spent 5 years in Tokoroa, which is a small town here in New Zealand. And that was a really great, a really awesome experience, and really awakened my heart to pastor, like the love for people.
So when you say that you took over the church, you mean like you had the opportunity to serve them
Yeah, I mean,
in that pastoral role, not like
in the
become their
pastoral role,
not become their
yes.
dictator.
Pastoral role. The first time I was called pastor,
Right.
and people looked to me for leadership, kind of, that not as a dictator, because I'm not a very good dictator. I wouldn't be a very good dictator, but yeah, to preach. I mean, preach 2 or 3 times a week, every single week, and I mean the challenge of preparing messages to the same people, like that was probably the biggest challenge. And yeah, I grew to love that. Yeah, I grew just to really just look to God for what He wanted to speak to the church. Obviously I was working on the side just to survive a little bit. I mean, the church was supporting us, and a few other New Zealand churches were helping us, but I was working as a self-employed painter as well. And so after 5 years, yeah, God made it clear that we weren't the ones to take the church into the future, and it was it was just going to be better for us to leave, to step down, which was a really hard decision to make, because it's not that I wanted to ever leave that church, and they had faced a lot of abandonment almost from pastors, so I didn't want to do that at all. But it just became clear that I wasn't going to be able to take them into the future.
And so how many years had you been there at that point?
That was 5 years.
Right.
Yeah. And so then we took a year kind of sabbatical almost, or it was supposed to be like okay, let's just pray for God's will with my wife's family in Tauranga. And so that was kind of just a break for us to refocus on where did God want us to be in the long run, or next at least, what did He want us to be doing. And so during that time, God made it clear that we would come to where we are now in Wanganui.
Nice. And we're here with you now, which is great. And tomorrow we get to go see your church and meet some of the people that you're serving, and we're really excited about that.
Yeah.
And how did you get to the point where you had a relationship with God? Like, when did that begin?
Well, so I was saved as a 5-year-old because I understood from Sunday school. I learned about hell, and that because we've sinned against God, that God can't let us into heaven. And so when they asked us if we knew what sin was, they explained a little bit, and I was like, oh, yep, yeah, I'm a sinner. Because I had a real bad temper when I was little. And so my annoying sister, Lydia, had locked me out of my room, and all my Lego was in my room, and I loved my room. And she had locked the door.
I do not remember this at all, but he tells it a lot.
She was 7 years old, so she must remember. No, I don't know. And so, but I remember getting angry and trying to beat down the door with my Stegosaurus toy. And I remember scratching the paint off the door with the toy. Like, I
Wow.
was pretty upset. And so when they asked in Sunday school, have you sinned? Have you ever sinned? And I was like, yeah. And so it wasn't too long after that they explained that you needed to ask Jesus for forgiveness. And I remember, not the date, but I remember the time of going up to Mum and Dad's bedroom at a house.
It must have been Detroit.
In Detroit, I'm pretty sure it was.
It's the only place we had stairs, I think.
Yeah, and just going up and asking them if they could show me how I could be saved. Like, I needed to be saved. And so I remember going in there, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember from that day on, I didn't ever have any doubts that I was saved. I knew that I was saved. And so that was the start of my relationship with God. And then, I was baptized when I was 8. I remember that because Dad baptized me.
Where was that?
At Prairie, I'm pretty sure.
Nice.
And then, I always remembered wanting to serve. Like, I don't ever remember a time where I wanted to be a fireman or a policeman. I always wanted to be a pastor.
Wow.
From being a kid. And then, like, when I was 15, 16, 17, even going, when I left for Bible college, I hadn't ever got a call. The call from God, like, go and preach. And I had heard from a lot of 13-year-olds that 13, 12, 14-year-olds, oh, yeah, God called me to preach. I know I'm called. And I just never had that. And it wasn't until I was at Bible college that I kind of started justifying, okay, well, I just want this. And 1 Timothy 3 says, if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good thing, a good work. And so I just kind of started going, okay, well, I must not need to be called. But yeah, God showed me my 3rd year of college that the reason I wasn't being called was because there was sin that I wasn't dealing with. And when I finally was challenged about that and confronted, in my very soul, I couldn't hide it anymore. That's when God made it. He just flicked the light on for me, and yeah, I've never doubted a day since then that I've been called to preach. In what role? It's been hard. Assistant pastor, and now layman.
Assistant to the pastor?
Yeah, layman, really. At the moment I'm just a layman, but I still want to preach.
Yeah.
I still want to help people understand the Bible as God shows me things. I want to share that with them.
And how have you navigated through, issues with church hurt, or when either many people in the church have hurt you directly or you've seen hypocrisy? How do you navigate that?
Well, yeah, being in the pastorate did show me a lot of things that I'd never expected to experience. And so I'd never understood anyone that struggled with bitterness. I was just like, why don't you just forgive? It's so much easier just to forgive. And until something happened that kind of went, oh, if you feel like that, then I'll just never ever do this again. And that point, I was like, I think that's bitterness coming through. That because of how I feel, I don't want to be open with them ever again. Whereas God calls us to love unconditionally, and we can't say, I will never do that again.
Right.
We can't say that to God, because he'll say, you know what, I can't use you then. If you can't do what I want, then I can't use you. And that's why we have to be ready to do whatever God says, whenever God says, really. And so, bitterness was one I had to learn, then depression was one that I'd never faced ever growing up. I don't know, maybe I am a slightly melancholy person, but not a depressed person naturally. But ministry at one point, and we discussed this, you helped me get through this by naming it, that it was just depression. Like, it was actually a nameable, it's not a sin to be depressed. To face depression, I don't think it's a sin to face it. I think it's a sin to see that you can't ever get over it. And that's where the Psalms comes through, and Psalm 52, I think it is, or...
Hey, you're the pastor.
Well, when it says, it might be Psalm 54, but it's talking about, "O soul, why art thou disquieted within me? Hope thou in God." And it was David having to come to the realization that he was talking to himself when he was
Right.
saying, "Why are you disquieted?" I think until you name depression, you can't overcome it.
Yeah.
If you attack yourself, why am I feeling this way? But you name it and say, okay, I felt pushed down, I felt burdened, but now I need to hope in the Lord.
Yeah, and I find that, like, because when I went through it two different ways, it was very different to what I see other people going through. And what I learned most from having gone through that experience was that I just need to have so much grace.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me to have so much compassion. And, a lot of people, they do need to name things. They need to get those worries written out or out of their brain so that neural thing isn't continually spouting bad thoughts and bad things and bitterness and all of these things. Not that is all of what it is, because for me, mine was totally chemical.
Mm-hmm. And I think depression, when people are struggling with depression, now that I've experienced just a taste of it, I don't think I can't understand long-term depression, but what I've seen is that you have to be a lot more patient than you think. Like I just was always like, just get over it. Like, you need to change your focus to get out of it rather than focusing where you are. But it takes everyone different length of time to climb out of that place where they are depressed.
Yeah. Well, especially being so many different reasons
And I
and
mean,
things that cause
if
it.
it's chemical, then yeah, there might be an external, I mean, something else you can help take that. But if it's, I mean, looking at the life of Elijah, or someone that had a great victory and then a mountaintop and then a deep valley where he was threatened to die, he was threatened to be killed, and he said, "God, take my life." But it was just because he was burnt out.
Yeah.
And God said, "Eat some food."
And rest. And he ministered to him.
Yeah.
And God showed great compassion
Mm.
during that time. And I appreciate so much that story's in the Bible, because I think that for most people there will be some time in their life where they do get burnt out, and they might think, "Oh, I'm a failure because I feel this way." And as you said, it's totally not a shame thing. And unfortunately, in a lot of our culture, it can be seen as a shame. And obviously, people are working to make it not be that. But that's why I keep talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many factors that go into it. And you're certainly not going to get better by not getting it out.
No. And that's where I did have to learn, the truth of naming the sin, or naming what you're going through even. Like, just name, this could be depression. And that's not wrong to be depressed, but don't just go, "Oh, it's just me. There's no hope for me." And yeah, I still have a lot of sympathy for the people that struggle with that, because it is, I mean, it's a huge weight. But I think if we would share it, and if other Christians that maybe aren't struggling with depression would take the time to go, "You know what, let me share this with you. Let me carry the burden with you." Instead of saying, "Okay, I'm busy. All the best with that." And we kind of just, instead of bearing one another's burdens, like it says in Galatians 6, we kind of go, "Oh, okay, well, I'm a bit busy to help you with that," or even to think about it, like what they might be going through, because it is hard. It is hard to bear one another's burdens, because it takes time out of your day and thoughts that aren't very happy, could be causing their burdens. But that's our duty as believers, is to bear one another's burdens, not just your own burden and say, "Okay, something you have to deal with."
Yeah. And I know that we've had to deal with in our lives as like pastors' kids, we've seen, I guess, the deeper struggle than what a lot of other kids our age would have seen. And we've seen different challenges in the ministry. And one of the things that we saw fairly young was when someone chose to take their own life. And I in my naivety, and what I think probably a lot of people feel, is that was just so selfish. How could they possibly do that or think about it or whatever? And it wasn't until when I was dealing with depression, when I was a mom of 2 young children, and I was starting to have some thoughts like that, that they were totally justified in my mind, because I was not healthy mentally at the time. My depression at the time was completely related to lack of sleep. That was what was the cause of my chemical depression. It was hormonal imbalance, all these things. Just by Cameron's work schedule at the time, it was just so overwhelming. And I started to justify that, oh, it'd be easier if I wasn't here and all of these things. And I didn't recognize it as depression until I actually voiced those dark thoughts to my husband. And at that stage, it was like suddenly the light came on and I was like, oh, I must be depressed. Like, this is what I've heard about. And the thing that it taught me so much, though, was that when your mind isn't working right, it makes sense. And that terrified me. And ever since, whenever I've heard of something like that happening, I'm like, oh, I get it. Because I've been in that space where it made sense. I could justify it. And people can justify anything depending on where their mind is. And so...
And if you don't communicate that to someone else that's not thinking in that same line, and that's where you do need good friends. And you have to have, I believe, I mean, one thing I learned, I mean, from watching people in ministry, even when I was at Bible college, was that you are never above a group of friends that you can communicate your struggles with. You're never above that. And if you are in a very vulnerable place, because you can't reason in those dark times right. You can't reason what is right for your family, because sometimes you think, oh, well, it'd be better if I was dead.
Right. And
whereas that's never the best choice.
And there's, in the multitude of counselors, there's safety.
Yeah.
And so when you have been failed by people that say you looked up to, did that ever shake your faith, or how did it not shake your faith when you would see people that you respected that have fallen or had sin in their life that was discovered?
Well, so I know this is possibly not the example you're thinking of, but the first time that I was shaken where I either had to run to God or run away from God, like I just didn't know what to do, was actually the first year of college, when you left. and I mean, you came to me that morning, I don't know if you remember this, and you said, Garrett, I have to leave, goodbye, and you walked out and you drove off, and that was before breakfast, and that was...
I surely told you the day before.
No, you told me that morning, because I didn't know it all. Yeah, it happened very fast, and I got told in the morning when you were leaving.
Wow, I'm sorry.
And I'm not upset about it anymore. I mean, I think for a while I was hurt that I hadn't been told earlier, so I could kind of be mentally prepared for the event.
To be clear, I only found out the afternoon before, and then I was packing. And then
I'm not
saying, I'm just clarifying for them.
Yeah.
So I only knew the afternoon before that I was going to need to leave college because I had broken some rules and I was justifiably kicked out. But I didn't have to leave that same day because I had to travel 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I was probably a little bit in shock and packing myself. And I don't know how I didn't tell you. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I just remember that morning after you left. And I mean, thankfully, I think I'm a little bit, I think in a way I am a little bit so slow that I couldn't ever think, okay, God, why did you allow this to happen? I just went, okay, Lord, I don't know what to do. And that was when I went, okay, Lord, that was the one person I know and I knew I could count on, and now she's not here. I need you. And so it kind of made me go, I mean, I'd always kind of known the song, Lord, I Need You, but that was the first time it kind of became, okay, I can't call mom and dad now, and they'll come and get me. That was the week before recording, and I think everyone was kind of like, okay, everything was on go, go, go. And I just was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Yeah. But it didn't shake my faith in God. It just shook my like, oh, wow, what am I going to do? And I just had to go, okay, Lord, you know what's happening, and I can count on you. And so when something else happened later in school, and the pastor at the time took his own life, I think that I didn't have to go, oh, what's going on? Like, I mean, obviously everyone was going, okay, what's happening? But I wasn't like, oh, this is a surprise. Like, I'm not going to trust in God anymore because I learned that he was faithful from that first event. So.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it took me abandoning you to... I'm glad you learned the lesson, because that is really important lesson to learn. But also, I'm sorry that I was the source of that heartache and that grief. So you would have been going through grief. I mean, it would have been a trauma to you to have basically your security suddenly ripped away. And we were really close.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and obviously I had a lot of other stuff I was dealing with, so I probably wasn't in communication much either, because I was dealing with my own anger and grief, and I had all the stages of grief with that, for sure.
Well, and so, yeah, I mean, like, I still had Becca. Becca and I were still in communication, but it wasn't something I was going to talk to her about, like, I feel abandoned. It wasn't, because it was just something that I just didn't, I was just so shocked about how it had happened. And so, I mean, like, I remember that morning, a few tears, like, I cried for a bit, because I'm like, okay, what's going on? But then after that, it was actually later, quite a few years later, that I had to actually deal with that. A little bit of possibly almost bitterness, but it wasn't, but you didn't know about it, so for a long time. So it wasn't like I could be like, oh, I'm so upset with you. You just didn't know that caused me any grief.
I didn't know about it until 2020, and it happened in 2008.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't see each other much, though.
Yeah, we didn't.
Because Becca went over...
Like, I came back for your wedding.
Yeah.
Was the main time, but that's not like hey, I need to deal with something right now. You're right. I wasn't going to do that. So, and yeah, I don't ever think bitterness is worth it.
Right.
But it was just something I had never dealt with, the grief of that, for a long time. Until then, probably until 2020. I was like, that really annoyed me. Well, that really... It wasn't cool. Yeah, it just wasn't cool. No. But it wasn't that you had intended to do it or that you had meant to do it. It was just, I'd just been left.
All my foolishness had consequences that affected you as well. And often our unwise decisions affect more than ourselves. And I guess you were one of the victims, and I'm sorry. It definitely taught me a lot. And it definitely helped a lot of people to realize that... Well, not that I hope anybody ever thought I was perfect, but even now, like, when I'm talking to people, I'm like, I am so far from perfect, and I have failed, and I will continue to fail, and that we just need to have our eyes on Jesus, not on people, because people will always fail us. And I tell that to so many people, because they tell me about their different church hurt issues and Christians in their lives that have done this or that. And I'm like, well, they were wrong. And I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that people do wrong things 100%, because they're people.
Yeah.
And
that's, I think we both had to learn, we both saw that, you see that in ministry, that people hurt people, and that, I mean, and yeah, Mum and Dad were pretty amazing at modeling forgiveness in the face of hurt. Yeah,
like, pretty much the only thing in my life, for most of my life, that has offended me has been seeing people I love be hurt. Not me. Like, I can get over things pretty quickly about me. But when I see people hurting those that I love, who I know mean well, that I really struggled with, because it didn't feel fair. And I've had to release bitterness around stuff like that too. We should probably wrap things up, because I do have a baby inside. But I have enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that as people listen to this, that they will just hear some of the lessons that we've learned. And do you have any final words that you'd like to say?
So to finish off, I would say, keep trusting God. look to him because he'll never let you down. And yeah, I mean, do surround yourself with godly people that have proven themselves to be faithful, but God is the only one that will never fail you. So look to him.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you have any questions about what you've heard today, or even if you want to simply reach out and talk, please do. You can reach me through the email address in the show notes or through Lydia Garner on social media. If you have felt encouraged or challenged today as you listened, please subscribe to the podcast so you can hear more interviews like this one. Please share it so that others can be reached. The next Faith Chat is a surprise. We are heading to America for a month, and I hope to record several Faith Chats while in the presence of some people I really admire for their faithfulness. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss the encouraging Faith Chats to come. We have no guarantee of a tomorrow, so friends, let today be the day that you sort things out between you and your Creator. Only you know what may be keeping you from the close relationship He desires to have with you. Every story is valuable, and your journey, whether you are in a valley or on a mountaintop, can be used for God's glory.